Myself Praveen. Today I'm going to talk about macroprocessors and its functions. So this is the introduction concept of macroprocessors. So it has three concepts under the macroprocessors. The microprocessor instructions is notational convenience for the programmer, and it allows the programmer to write shortened version for module programming. And the microprocessor replaces each macro inversion with corresponding sequence of statements that it expanded with the codings to the large program. So next is macroprocessors functions, and it is also called as tasks to execute the program. So under the microprocessor task is recognize macro definitions and save macro definitions and recognize macro calls and expand macro calls. So this is the block diagram of each functions or task. Source code it converted into microprocessor, and it goes to expanded code to the compiler to execute to the object code. So this is macro. What is macro definitions? So it uses to copy the code and parameter substitutions and conditional macro expansion and macro instruction defining macros. So this is example for a copy code. So it is source program is is expanded to this expanded source. So macro it starts from macro, stores the data 1 and data 2 and n number of datas and it with the macro end. Whereas in expanded source, it stores the data 1, data 2 and data 3, and it expanded the same data to n number of times. So let's see what is macro versus subroutine. Macro is the statement expressions are generated each time that are invoked. So let's see what is subroutine means. Subroutine appears only once, whereas macro appears more than once time. So let's see what is parameters and substitution examples. This is another functions of macroprocessors. So this is source code and expanded source. They have given two examples, that is from source and expanded source. So it starts from macro. It has addresses A1, addresses A2, and addresses S3, and it stores under STA and STB and index of address of A3, and it will macro end. Whereas in expanded source, same as what I said in yeah, recognized definitions, where recognized calls and macro uh, expanded calls. So it has expanded source to the source to expand the code. So next is what, let's say what is parameter substitutions. There is dummy arguments, that is positional argument stores string data 1, data 2 and data 3, and keyword argument means it has the key that is addressed to the each datas, that is it address A3 to data 1 and A2 to data 2 and A1 to data 3, and example labels are avoided in macro definition. This is the main concepts of examples of parameter substitutions. So let's see what is one pass macroprocessors. Every requisite, that is every macro must be defined before it is called. So sub procedures are macro definitions, that is definitions it is defined as defined, and macro inversion is expand. So this is name tab and def tab and argument tab, that is name table tab and definition tab and argument tab. So this is defined and expanded. So this is the macro define and call expand. This is process line of each macro and call. So the process line helps to macro define into the name tab and definition tab, and whereas in call expand to the arguments for the process of macroprocessor programs to expand the data in the argument list. So this is the small example flowchart of microprocessors. Each that has called as functions of microprocessor as well as tasks. So it starts from password and it will reads and it gives to search. So search for sudo opcode that is named as POT. What we have seen in flowchart of each flowchart of each definitions, that is sudo opcode table, machine name table, that is search machine op table, uh, and process machine instructions. Such sudo up table means it type each question mark it goes to pass to where and it's given the options like macro def and process sudo and search tab means a macro name table, that is a macro to expand for the purpose that has told that it expand the source code for the data in the program, and it processed again it goes to machine name table, macro name table and search for machine of table and process machine instructions. The process it, process, it process it process the repeated functions again and again. So this is my concept, that is macro processors. So thank you for listening.